A very high percentage of medical professionals will end up completely dependent on Social Security for their income in retirement. This might sound scary, but it actually tracks with recent data that just came out. The National Institute on Retirement Security just discovered that 40% of older Americans are currently completely dependent upon Social Security for their retirement needs. Figuring out how this happens and how you can avoid it happening to you is one of the keys to making sure that you can replace your lifestyle in retirement and not be facing major lifestyle cuts when that time comes. Before we talk about how much Social Security will give you, let's first talk about how you end up totally reliant upon it. Back in the 80s, 60% of the private sector had a pension, meaning the burden of your retirement actually fell onto your employer and not to you. Social Security is actually intended only to replace about 40% of pre-retirement income. And so based upon that, plus a pension, you had workers who were able to retire very comfortably without having to do a lot of saving or investing on their own. Fast forward to today, and outside of the military, we find that in the private sector, less than 10% of people have a pension. This absolutely tracks for medical professionals. And again, if you are non-military, it's very likely that the burden of your retirement has shifted squarely from your employer to you. And while you might get some help in the form of a 401k or 403b match, it is up to you to create any asset base to help you outside of what Social Security will give. Now, I already mentioned that Social Security is intended to replace 40% of your income, which should alarm you to begin with because most financial planners recommend replacing 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement, depending on how you feel about longevity and what the human lifespan will be in a few decades. So you need 70 to 80%, but Social Security is designed to only give you 40%. If you look at averages right now, as of fall of 2024, the average monthly payment is sitting at about $1,800 a month. But that's not super applicable to medical professionals, most of whom have earned six figures the majority of their working careers and thus will be on the higher side of Social Security benefits. It's impossible to look at any given year of income and determine what your Social Security benefit will be because the formula is based upon 35 years of average indexed earnings. But you can see this data from USA Today on what it would look like if your average was $100,000 per year over those 35 years. If you claim at 66, you're looking at $2,687 per month, which translates into about $32,000 a year. Your benefit would increase if you delayed that up until 70 to $34.75 per month, which translates to about $42,000 per year. So again, not enough money to live off of. And so based upon that, my approach is to create a standard inflation-adjusted retirement for myself with my own investments so that I can take care of my needs, Social Security benefit aside. As you know, there is a funding crisis for Social Security, but it seems unlikely that a program that currently meets the total needs of 40% of older Americans would ever go away completely. Regardless, I don't plan on my Social Security benefit for the simple reason that even if there is one, it may not be what I would currently project it to be, and I want to make sure that my needs are met without it. So let me show you the math behind taking care of an inflation-adjusted standard retirement on your own. This is a calculator to help explain some of the numbers. The first key question to ask yourself is if you're replacing a percent of gross income or using inflation-adjusted expenses in your initial calculations. Now, the more accurate way to do this is to actually replace your expenses. However, you can pretty easily create numbers that are unreasonable and out of control if you're at the very beginning of your financial journey and you actually try to plug inflation-adjusted expenses into your calculations. This calculator has you doing 80% of current income in retirement. Again, you could adjust that down to 70% if you wanted. But If you're someone who's at the beginning of your financial journey and you may have a small 401k contribution or something in the background, but you're spending the vast majority of your income, you don't have a consistent investing rate that's above 20%, your inflation adjusted expenses will create very, very large projections for the amount you need to have invested because your expenses are nearly 100% of your take home pay. If you are consistently investing 20, 25, 30% of your income, using your actual expenses would be the more accurate way to do this. So let's assume that this person's spending the majority of their income. They haven't really established investing patterns yet. And so we'll say we're replacing 80% of current income. You would here plug in the current balance you have invested. So again, we'll say they're starting towards the beginning of their investing journey. We'll say that they're 30 years old. And that last year, they invested about $12,000. So this can be a single individual earning $130,000. Let's say they put $12,000 last year in their 401k, and they had some pre-existing investments. So they're looking at $20,000 invested, $12,000 in contributions last year. Now again, this assumes 8% returns compounded annually. Now, if you didn't look at inflation at all, you would say, okay, we would need a $2.6 million to retire, again, excluding Social Security benefits. If you incorporate a 2.5% inflation rate, that number actually increases up to $6.1 million. Again, excluding Social Security benefits, if you wanted to maintain 80% of current income with an inflation adjustment of 2.5% per year, the gold nest egg would be close to $6.2 million. Now you can see this person's investing habits aren't yet established, and they're projected to be, maybe only 33% of the way of where they would need to be if they continue doing what they're doing. Now, of course, Social Security will step in and help a little bit with the difference, remembering that Social Security is only intended to replace about 40% of your pre-retirement income if it is funded as it currently is. And so that may not be enough to pick up the slack here. This is the math behind the calculator, which leverages what's classically referred to as a safe withdrawal rate of 4%, meaning that you can take out 4% of your portfolio every year starting at age 65 and then not run out of money before you die, which is the goal. So you're looking at your annual expenses or percent of household gross income times 25, which is just the mathematical inverse of the 4% rule, gives you the amount needed. So for an example, if you had $80,000 in annual expenses times 25, that would give you a gold nest egg of $2 million. But when you inflation adjust that $80,000 out for 30 years, for example, if you were 35, then that gives you new inflation adjusted expenses of $167,000 and a new gold nest egg, in this case, of a little over $4 million. While these numbers may be big and overwhelming, it's actually very possible to create a multi-seven-figure portfolio as a six-figure earner medical professional. The key is time and consistency. So if you haven't started yet, there's no time like the present. If the whole idea of this feels preposterous to you, make sure you watch my next video on how to become a millionaire as a PA.